They say that a tiger, no matter how hungry, will never eat its own cubs. It is a primal instinct, a law of nature designed to protect the bloodline. But in the human world, within the gated communities of Atlanta's black elite, that rule does not always apply. Sometimes, the monster isn't hiding in the shadows. Sometimes, the monster is the one who tucks you in at night. Let me take you back to a rainy Tuesday in November. The sky over Atlanta wasn't just gray, it was heavy, suffocating, as if the heavens themselves were trying to wash away a sin that could not be forgiven. In the center of the weeping crowd, there were two caskets, tiny, white, pristine. Inside them lay Noah, 7 years old, and Elijah, just 5. The sound at the funeral was deafening, but it wasn't the thunder, it was the wailing of a woman. Clara Vance, the grandmother, the matriarch of the wealthy Vance dynasty. She was draped in expensive black silk, throwing her body over the coffins, screaming to God, asking why He had taken her precious angels away. Under the dry, protective canopy of the VIP tent, she was the picture of devastated grief. But look closer. Look past the grandmother's theatrics. Standing 5 feet away, completely outside the tent, exposed to the freezing rain, was LaToya, the mother. No one held an umbrella for her. No one offered her a hand. The relatives of the Vance family whispered behind their gloved hands, shooting glances of pure disdain at her. They didn't look at her like a grieving mother. They looked at her like she was the stain that caused this tragedy. Her dark skin was soaked with rain and tears, her body shaking violently, isolated in a sea of people who hated her simply for existing. And then there was the father, Marcus Vance. He stood between his wailing mother and his shivering wife, but he looked at neither. He stood like a stone statue, his eyes wide, hollow, staring at the wet earth. He looked like a man who knew a secret that was eating him alive from the inside out. The police report said it was a tragic accident, a wrong turn near a lake. But the streets were whispering something else. Because when they pulled those sweet boys out of the water, they weren't fighting, they weren't scratched. They were dressed in their Sunday best, holding hands, floating peacefully, as if someone they trusted had simply told them to go to sleep. This isn't just a story about murder. This is a story about a poison that runs deeper than cyanide. It is about the color of your skin, the pride of a bloodline, and a grandmother who decided that her family tree needed to be pruned. Welcome to Black Mystery. Today, we uncover the truth behind the tears. To understand why Noah and Elijah had to die, we have to look at the man who fathered them, Marcus Vance. In the insular world of Atlanta's black elite, Marcus was what they called a golden child. And that term wasn't just about his money, it was about his skin. He was light-skinned, with hazel eyes and loose curls. To his mother, Clara, Marcus was the culmination of generations of careful selection. He was the trophy of the Vance family legacy. In Clara's twisted worldview, success wasn't just about bank accounts. It was about distance. Distance from the struggle, distance from the ghetto, and most importantly, distance from blackness. Clara Vance belonged to a generation that still secretly believed in the paper bag test. If you were darker than a brown paper bag, you didn't belong in the front pew at church, and you certainly didn't belong in the Vance family tree. She had groomed Marcus to marry a woman of similar standing, someone light, someone safe, someone who would continue the process of, as she put it, improving the bloodline. But Marcus committed the ultimate sin. He fell in love with LaToya. LaToya was everything Clara feared. She was brilliance wrapped in midnight skin, a university professor with a PhD in literature, She was sharper and smarter than anyone in the Vance family. But she was undeniably, unapologetically dark-skinned. When Marcus brought her home for the first time, the temperature in the dining room dropped 20 degrees. Clara didn't see a scholar. She didn't see a loving partner for her son. She saw a step backward. She saw a contamination. The arguments that followed were legendary. Clara didn't use racial slurs. She was too sophisticated for that. She used concern. She would sit Marcus down, pouring him tea, and whisper poison into his ear. "I am only thinking about your children, Marcus," she would say, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Think about how hard the world is for us. Why would you want to make it harder for your sons? Why bring them into the world with a target on their backs? You need someone who matches you." It was gaslighting at its finest. She tried to make her self-hatred look like maternal protection. But back then, Marcus was strong. He was blinded by love, and he possessed a spine that hadn't yet been broken. He slammed his hand on the mahogany table and told his mother that he didn't care about her outdated color politics. He told her that Latoya was the queen of his life, and she would be treated as such. He married her in a private ceremony, defying the matriarch. He thought love was enough to break the generational curse. He was wrong. When Noah was born, and then Elijah 2 years later, the genetic roll of the dice did not favor Clara's wishes. The boys were beautiful. They were healthy. But they were Latoya's sons. They had her rich, dark skin. They had her broad nose. They had her thick, coiled 4C hair. They looked nothing like Marcus. The first time Clara held baby Noah, she didn't coo. She didn't smile. She stared at the infant with a look of cold, clinical disappointment. She handed the baby back to the nurse after less than a minute. "He certainly has a strong look," she said. The word strong hung in the air like an insult. For 7 years, Clara played the role of the doting grandmother in public. She bought them expensive suits for Easter. She paraded them at church functions. But behind closed doors, the whispers began. It was a slow drip of poison, designed to erode Marcus's confidence. "Oh, Marcus," she would say, while looking at family photos. "Are you sure the hospital didn't make a mistake? They don't have your eyes. They don't have your chin. It's strange, isn't it, how different they are from you?" She never said the word affair out loud. She didn't have to. She planted the seed of doubt in the fertile soil of Marcus's insecurity. She watered it with side glances and heavy sighs. For a long time, Marcus ignored it. He defended his wife. He defended his sons. He loved his family. But a man can only withstand so much pressure before he breaks. And the breaking point didn't come from his mother. It came from a place he least expected. It came from a parking lot at a university on an afternoon that would change the course of history for the Vance family forever. It was a Thursday, a simple, unassuming Thursday in October. The kind of day that starts with a kiss and ends with a silence that lasts forever. Marcus decided to surprise Latoya. He left his architecture firm early, bought a bouquet of her favorite lilies, and drove to the university campus where she taught. He wanted to be the good husband. He wanted to prove to himself and to his mother that his family was solid, that they were happy. He parked his silver Lexus near the faculty exit, rolled down the window to let in the autumn breeze, and waited. He was smiling. He was looking at a photo of Noah and Elijah tucked in his sun visor. But then, voices drifted through the open window. 2 male students were walking past his car, gym bags slung over their shoulders, laughing, loud and reckless. They didn't see Marcus sitting behind the tinted glass. They were just talking. Locker room talk. Cruel, raw, and devastatingly honest. "Yo, did you see Professor Latoya's kids at the faculty picnic?" one voice said. "Yeah, man," the other replied, chuckling. "Cute kids, but damn, they are dark. Like midnight dark. Right? And then I saw her husband. That dude is high yellow, like light bright, damn near white. I was looking at him, then looking at those kids, and I was like, the math ain't mathin', bro." Marcus froze. His hand, which had been tapping the steering wheel, stopped midair. The voices continued, fading as they walked away, but every word felt like a sledgehammer hitting a pane of glass. "There is no way those are his biological kids," the student laughed. "Genetics don't skip like that. I bet you $100 she stepped out with that Nigerian exchange student from last semester. That dude is built like a linebacker and matches those kids perfectly. Man, that husband is just a placeholder, paying the bills for another man's legacy." Sad. Laughter, fading into the distance. Inside the car, the silence was deafening. Marcus didn't move. He didn't breathe. The lilies on the passenger seat suddenly looked ridiculous. The smile on his face had vanished, replaced by a cold, sickly realization. For years, he had fought his mother. He had told her she was crazy. He had told her she was prejudiced. But now, here were strangers, young men with no agenda, no connection to the family, saying the exact same thing. Paying the bills for another man's legacy. The seed that Clara had planted didn't just sprout, it exploded into a forest of thorns. Marcus looked up at the sun visor again. He looked at the photo of Noah and Elijah. 5 minutes ago, he saw his sons. Now, he squinted. He looked at their noses. He looked at the deep, rich pigment of their skin. And for the first time in his life, he didn't see himself. He saw strangers. He saw betrayal. He saw the Nigerian student he had never met but now hated with a burning passion. When Latoya finally walked out of the building, smiling and waving when she saw his car, Marcus didn't wave back. He unlocked the doors, but he didn't lean over to kiss her. "Hey, baby, what a surprise," she chirped, buckling her seatbelt. She reached for his hand. Marcus pulled his hand away. He gripped the steering wheel so hard, his knuckles turned white. "You okay?" she asked, her smile fading. "I'm fine," he lied, but his voice was dead. It was the voice of a man who had just checked out of his marriage. That drive home was the beginning of the end. Marcus stopped engaging. He stopped protecting. And Clara, like a shark smelling blood in the water, she sensed the shift immediately. She saw the coldness in her son's eyes, and she knew her work was almost done. She didn't need to scream anymore. She just needed to wait for the opportunity to fix the mistake once and for all. And that opportunity came 2 weeks later. The weeks that followed were not loud. There were no plates thrown against the wall. There was no screaming matches in the hallway. Instead, there was silence, a thick, suffocating silence that filled the Vance mansion like carbon monoxide, odorless, invisible, and deadly. Marcus began to work late. At least, that is what he told Latoya. He would come home long after the boys were asleep, smelling of bourbon and expensive cigars. He stopped reading bedtime stories. He stopped wrestling with them on the living room rug. When he looked at Noah and Elijah, his eyes no longer held the warmth of a father. They held the cold, calculating assessment of a stranger. He was looking for flaws. He was looking for proof. Latoya felt the shift violently. She was a smart woman, a doctor of philosophy, but even she couldn't calculate the variables of a man's shattered ego. She tried to bridge the gap. One night, she cornered him in the kitchen, slamming a genetics textbook on the counter. "Weed it, Marcus," she pleaded. tears streaming down her face. "It's basic biology. Dominant and recessive genes. My melanin is dominant. Your mother's obsession with skin tone has rotted your brain. Those are your sons." Marcus didn't look at the book. He poured himself another glass of whiskey, took a long, slow sip, and looked at her with eyes that were completely empty. "Are they?" he whispered. "Or are they just yours?" He walked away, leaving her sobbing in the kitchen light. He had checked out. The protector of the house had laid down his shield, and standing in the shadows of the hallway, watching it all with a small, satisfied smirk, was Clara. With Marcus mentally absent, Clara made her move. She didn't attack LaToya directly anymore. She didn't need to. She had won the war for her son's mind. Now she focused on the problem. She began to treat the children like unwanted guests in their own home. "Don't touch that, you'll dirty it," she would snap at 5-year-old Elijah. "You are too loud. You are too rough. You are just like your mother's people." She started scrubbing them in the bath too hard, as if she could wash the blackness off their skin. She cut their hair shorter and shorter, trying to tame the curls she despised. To her, they weren't children. They were weeds in her perfectly manicured garden. Weeds that threatened to choke the life out of her son's future. In Clara's twisted mind, she wasn't a villain. She was a savior. She looked at her son, depressed, drinking, miserable, and she convinced herself that there was only one way to bring the old Marcus back. She had to hit the reset button. She had to erase the mistake. The atmosphere in the house grew heavy with foreboding. The air felt charged, like the static before a lightning strike. LaToya considered leaving. She packed a bag one Tuesday morning, planning to take the boys to her sister's house in Chicago. "Just for a while," she told herself. "Just until Marcus snaps out of it." But she waited one day too long. The universe sometimes gives us warnings, a feeling in the gut, a cold shiver down the spine. But sometimes, fate moves faster than intuition. On November 14th, the water main burst at the elementary school. It was a minor infrastructure failure, an inconvenience for most parents. But for the Vance family, it was the opening act of a tragedy. The school called for early pickup at 1 p.m. LaToya was in the middle of a lecture hall, her phone on silent inside her bag. Marcus was in a high-stakes meeting with partners, his phone turned off. The school called the third number on the emergency contact list. "Mrs. Vance, this is the school secretary. Can you come pick up Noah and Elijah?" On the other end of the line, Clara Vance smiled. She checked her reflection in the hallway mirror. She adjusted her pearl necklace. "Of course," she said, her voice smooth as velvet. "I'll be there right away. I'll take care of them." She grabbed her keys, but she didn't grab the car seats, and deep in her pocket, her fingers brushed against a small, heavy bottle of liquid sedative she had been saving for her insomnia. The wolf was on her way to the fold. The pickup line at the elementary school was a parade of minivans and sedans. But Clara's black Mercedes moved through it like a hearse, sleek, silent, imposing. When Noah and Elijah saw their grandmother's car, they didn't run the way children usually do. They walked. Even at 5 and 7, they had learned that Grandma Clara did not like running. She did not like noise. She did not like wildness. "Get in," she said. The windows were rolled up tight. The air conditioning was set to a chilling 65 degrees. The boys climbed into the back seat, their small backpacks thumping against the pristine leather. They buckled themselves in. They knew better than to ask for help. "Where is Mommy?" Noah asked, his voice small. "Busy," Clara replied, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. "Where is Daddy?" "Busy." The car pulled out of the school zone, gliding onto the main avenue. For a few miles, there was silence. just the hum of the engine and the soft rhythm of the turn signal. But silence, for a child, is unnatural. Little Elijah, sitting behind the driver's seat, kicked his legs a little. He looked at the back of his grandmother's head. He wanted reassurance. He wanted to know why his world had turned so cold lately. "Grandma?" he whispered. Clara's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. "What is it, Elijah? Why doesn't Daddy kiss us goodnight anymore? Is he mad at us?" The question hung in the air, innocent, heartbreaking. A question that should have made any grandmother pull over and hug her grandchild. But Clara didn't pull over. She tightened her grip on the steering wheel until her leather gloves creaked. She looked into the mirror again, but this time she didn't just see a child. She looked at Elijah's broad nose. She looked at the deep, rich obsidian of his skin. She looked at the texture of his hair, and in her mind, distorted by decades of internalized racism and obsession with status, she didn't see her son's blood. She saw a lie. She saw the Nigerian student the rumors spoke of. She saw the ghetto encroaching on her dynasty. "Your father isn't mad at you," Clara said, her voice terrifyingly calm. "He is just tired. He is tired of carrying a burden that isn't his." "Am I a burden?" Elijah asked, confused. Clara didn't answer. A strange sensation washed over her. It wasn't fear, it wasn't guilt, it was relief. A dark, euphoric sense of clarity. She realized that she was the only one strong enough to fix this. Marcus was too weak. LaToya was too stubborn. It was up to her. She had to scrub the stain out. She had to reset the family. They were approaching the intersection that led to the Vance estate. The blinker should have clicked right, but Clara kept the wheel straight. "Grandma?" Noah piped up, noticing the route change. "You missed the turn. Home is that way." "We aren't going home, boys," Clara said. A small, chilling smile touched her lips for the first time in months. "We are going to a special place, a quiet place. I'm going to take you to get baptized, a real baptism, to wash everything away." She pressed her foot down on the accelerator. The car surged forward, leaving the safety of the suburbs behind, heading toward the overgrown, abandoned quarry at the edge of town. The wolf had left the path, and there was no one around to hear the scream. The quarry was dead silent. Even the birds seemed to know better than to sing in a place like this. The water was dark, still, and deep, a mirror reflecting the gray sky above. It was the kind of place where secrets went to drown. Clara parked the car near the edge of the embankment. She turned off the engine. The silence rushed in, filling the car. "Are we going swimming, Grandma?" Elijah asked, looking out at the cold, murky water. He shivered. "I didn't bring my floaties." "We aren't swimming, child," Clara said softly. She reached into her oversized purse and pulled out 2 bottles of grape soda. The seals had already been broken, but the boys didn't notice. "We are just going to sit by the water. But first, drink this. It's a special communion, to make you pure." The boys were thirsty. They trusted her. They took the bottles with small, grateful hands. They drank deeply, the purple liquid staining their lips. Clara watched them. She watched their throats swallow the sedative she had crushed into the sugary drink. She didn't look away. She didn't blink. In her mind, she wasn't poisoning them. She was giving them medicine. She was curing them of the affliction of their heritage. 5 minutes passed, then 10. "Grandma," Noah slurred, his eyelids drooping heavy. "I feel dizzy. I want to go home." "Shh," Clara cooed, reaching back to stroke his hair. But she didn't stroke it with love. She touched it with a grimace, feeling the coarse texture of his curls. "It's almost over. You're just relaxing. Come now, let's go to the water." She opened the door and walked around to the back. She practically had to carry them. They were stumbling, their legs like jelly, their minds foggy and confused. They were dead weight in her arms, but adrenaline gave her the strength of a much younger woman. She led them to the water's edge, where the mud was slick and cold. "Kneel," she commanded. Too weak to disobey, too drugged to understand, Noah and Elijah sank to their knees in the mud. They looked like two small, sacrificial lambs. Clara stood behind them. She looked at their dark necks. She looked at the water. She whispered a prayer, not for forgiveness, but for validation. "Lord, I return these souls to you. I clean my house. I clean my son's life. Wash them white as snow." With a sudden, violent shove, she pushed them forward. Splash. The sound was sickeningly small. Because of the drugs, there was no thrashing, there was no screaming. The water simply swallowed them. Noah tried to lift his head, his eyes wide with betrayal, locking onto his grandmother one last time. He reached a hand out, not to pull himself up, but reaching for her. Clara took a step back. She didn't reach out. She watched. She watched as the ripples spread. She watched as the small bubbles rose to the surface and then stopped. It was over. The stain was gone. But Clara wasn't done. The cold calculator in her brain took over. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a plastic bag. Inside were empty beer cans and used condom wrappers she had collected from a trash bin in a bad neighborhood days ago. She scattered them around the muddy bank. She wanted the world to find this. She wanted the police to come here, see the beer cans, see the dead black boys, and write the narrative she had scripted for them. Gang violence, thugs, bad parenting. She wiped her hands on a handkerchief, looked at the dark water one last time, and felt a rush of dopamine. She didn't feel like a murderer. She felt like a gardener who had finally pulled up the weeds. She walked back to her Mercedes, checked her makeup in the mirror, and practiced her scream. When the bodies were found the next morning by a fisherman, the machinery of the justice system began to turn. But it turned slowly, and it turned in the wrong direction. The police took one look at the beer cans and condom wrappers scattered near the muddy bank and wrote their narrative before the yellow tape was even up. Gang activity. Wrong place, wrong time. Or worse, they looked at LaToya, the grieving mother who had collapsed screaming on the pavement, and whispered about insurance money and neglect. They didn't interview the grandmother. Why would they? Clara Vance was a pillar of the community. She was the grieving matriarch who had fainted dramatically when the news broke. The detectives offered her water and sympathy while they dragged LaToya into an interrogation room for 6 hours. But LaToya knew something they didn't. She knew her mother-in-law, and she knew that the devil doesn't leave fingerprints, but he always leaves a trail of pride. Desperate and ignored, LaToya made the call that saved the truth. She called Malik Thorne. Malik was a former detective who had been kicked off the force for asking too many questions about corrupt officers. Now, he ran a podcast called Black Truths, investigating the cold cases the system forgot. He didn't care about police reports. He cared about patterns. He arrived at the quarry 2 days later. He ignored the trash on the bank. Instead, he looked at the tire tracks. Professional, Malik muttered into his recorder. No skid marks, no erratic driving. Whoever drove here didn't panic. They parked, they waited, and he squinted at the mud. They walked back to the car alone. He pulled a favor and got access to a grainy security feed from a gas station 3 miles down the road. The police hadn't bothered to check it, but Malik did. And at 1:45 p.m. on the day of the murder, he saw it, the sleek black Mercedes, and in the passenger seat, two small heads. The timeline didn't match the gang violence theory. It pointed straight to the heart of the Vance family. But while Malik was hunting for external evidence, the most devastating piece of evidence was sitting in a drawer in Marcus Vance's study. Marcus had been a ghost since the bodies were found. He hadn't slept. He hadn't eaten. He sat in his leather chair, staring at the wall, the voices of those college students still echoing in his head. Not his kids, another man's legacy. He opened the top drawer. There it was, the white envelope from the genetic testing lab. He had ordered the test a week before the murders, in a moment of weakness and paranoia. He had swabbed the boys' toothbrushes while they were sleeping. He wanted to know. He needed to know. His hand trembled as he picked it up. The paper felt heavy, like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Part of him wanted to burn it. If they weren't his, maybe the pain would be less. Maybe his mother was right. He tore the seal. He pulled out the single sheet of paper. His eyes scanned past the medical jargon, looking for the bottom line. The probability of paternity. He stopped. The air left his lungs. The room spun. Probability of paternity, 99.9998%. Conclusion. Marcus Vance is the biological father of Noah Vance and Elijah Vance. A sound escaped Marcus's throat. It wasn't a cry. It was the sound of a soul breaking in half. They were his, every cell, every drop of blood. Their dark skin wasn't a betrayal. It was just nature. It was just a gene. The rumors were lies. His mother's whispers were lies. His own doubt was a lie. He had let his mother treat them like trash. He had withdrawn his love. He had left them unprotected. And now, they were cold. They were gone. The realization hit him like a physical blow. His mother hadn't killed strangers. She hadn't cleaned the bloodline. She had murdered his sons, his own flesh and blood, and she had done it because he was too weak to tell her to stop. Marcus stood up. The whiskey glass fell from his lap and shattered on the floor, but he didn't hear it. The only thing he could hear was the blood rushing in his ears, screaming for vengeance. He grabbed the paper. He grabbed his keys. He wasn't going to the police. He was going to the funeral home. He was going to look his mother in the eye. The wake was being held in the grand parlor of the Vance estate. It was a scene of suffocating opulence. Heavy velvet curtains blocked out the sun. The room smelled of expensive lilies and hypocrisy. Clara sat on her antique sofa, surrounded by weeping church members. She dabbed her dry eyes with a lace handkerchief, accepting condolences like a queen accepting tribute. "It is God's will," she whispered to a neighbor. "He needed 2 more angels." But the heavy oak doors slammed open with a violence that made the crystal chandelier tremble. The room went dead silent. It was Marcus. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket. His tie was undone. His shirt was stained with sweat. And in his hand, he gripped a crumpled piece of paper like a weapon. "Marcus?" Clara stood up, her voice trembling with feigned concern. "My son, come, sit. You are distraught." Marcus didn't sit. He walked toward her. He moved like a predator. The crowd parted, sensing the radiation of his rage. "Stop acting," Marcus said. His voice was low, guttural, a sound that scraped against the bone. "Marcus, please, not in front of the guests," Clara hissed, her eyes narrowing. "There are no guests here, Mother, just witnesses." He stopped 2 feet in front of her. He raised the paper. "Do you know what this is?" Clara looked at the logo on the paper. Genetics Lab. For the first time, her mask slipped. A flicker of genuine fear crossed her face. "I don't know what you are talking about," she stammered. "It's the DNA test," Marcus roared, his voice cracking with agony. The test you made me want. The test to prove they weren't mine. Read it." He threw the paper at her. It hit her chest and fluttered to the floor. 99.9%, Marcus screamed. "They were mine. They were my blood. They were your grandchildren, and you killed them." Gasps erupted around the room. People stepped back, but before Clara could deny it, another voice cut through the chaos. "We know you did it, Mrs. Vance." Malik Thorne stood in the doorway. Behind him were two uniformed police officers. He held up a tablet. "We have the video from the gas station on Route 9, Malik said, his voice calm, steady, the voice of judgment. "We see you driving them to the quarry, and we found the bottle of sedative in your bathroom trash. It's over." Clara looked at the police. Then she looked at Marcus. She saw the hate in his eyes. She realized there was no way out. The performance was finished. And then something terrifying happened. Clara stopped shaking. She straightened her spine. She smoothed her dress. The weeping grandmother vanished, replaced by the cold, arrogant aristocrat. She looked at Marcus with a sneer of absolute disgust. "So what?" she spat. The room froze. "So what if they were yours?" Clara's voice was steady, dripping with venom. "Look at them, Marcus. Did you really look at them? They were black as coal. They were ugly. They looked like field hands, not Vances. Do you think I worked my whole life to build this dynasty just to let you pollute it with them?" LaToya let out a sound that wasn't human, a wail of pure despair. "I did it for you," Clara screamed at Marcus, her eyes wide and manic. "I cleaned your life up. You can start over. You can marry a proper woman. You can have children who look like us. I saved you." Marcus stared at the woman who gave him birth. He didn't see a mother. He saw a monster. He stepped forward, his hand raised, but Malik caught his arm. "Don't," Malik whispered. "Let her rot in a cage. That is the justice she deserves." As the officers handcuffed Clara, she didn't fight. She held her head high, walking out of her mansion with the twisted pride of a martyr. She truly believed she had done the right thing. And that is the true horror of this story. The trial was swift. The evidence was overwhelming. Clara Vance was sentenced to death by lethal injection. When the gavel came down, she didn't scream. She didn't beg for mercy. She simply adjusted her glasses and looked at the judge with eyes that were cold, dead, and utterly unrepentant. To her dying day, she believed she was a martyr for her family's honor. She sits on death row today, a queen of a kingdom that never existed. But the real sentence, the real punishment, fell on Marcus. Marcus Vance still lives in that big, beautiful mansion on the hill. He has the money. He has the prestige. He has the pure bloodline his mother wanted so badly. But if you walk past that house at night, you won't hear music. You won't hear laughter. You will only hear silence. LaToya left the city the day after the funeral. She couldn't breathe the same air as the man who let her children die. She moved away, carrying a grief that will never heal. A mother with empty arms and a heart full of scars. Marcus remains alone. He spends his days sitting in the boy's empty bedroom, staring at the DNA test that proved everything and fixed nothing. He is a man who traded his happiness for his mother's approval, and in the end, lost both. This story, this tragedy of Noah and Elijah, is not just a crime story. It is a mirror. It forces us to look at the ugly reflection of colorism in our own community. We spend so much time fighting the racism from outside that we forget the poison we drink inside our own homes. We judge each other by the shade of our skin, the texture of our hair, the width of our noses. We use words like good hair and bad hair we talk about marrying up, meaning marrying light. Clara Vance was a monster, yes, but she was a monster created by a society that told her black wasn't beautiful unless it was diluted. And to the men listening, let this be a warning written in blood. Your job is not to please your parents. Your job is to protect your wife and children. When the world attacks them, you stand in front. You do not let the whispers of the past destroy the future you are building. Marcus Vance failed because he was too weak to love his own reflection in his children's faces. Don't be Marcus. If this story made you angry, hold on to that anger. Use it. Hug your children a little tighter tonight, no matter what shade they are. Tell them they are beautiful. Tell them they are yours. Because if we don't love our own, who will? This has been a Black Mystery production. We tell the stories that the world tries to hide, because the truth is the only way we heal. If you believe in our mission, if you want to help us shine a light on the darkness, click that subscribe button. Share this video. Let the names of Noah and Elijah be heard. Until next time, stay awake, stay strong, and never let the silence win.